I never planned to tell this story. Not because it's scandalous. Not because it's shocking. But because it's the kind of memory that lives in the quiet part of you, the part you don't bring out at dinner parties, the part you don't even explain to yourself without feeling your throat tighten. And for most of my life, I was sure of one thing. If my mother ever knew, she'd look at me differently. I grew up in a house where the rules weren't written down, but you felt them anyway. The kind of house where you knew what you were supposed to be before you were old enough to question it. I was the youngest. The easy kid, my mother used to say. The one who didn't cause trouble. The one who smiled for photos and said, "Yes, ma'am," without being asked twice. Which is exactly why nobody noticed what I learned to do early. Hide parts of myself in plain sight. It started with something small, almost harmless. A feeling more than an action. Like the curiosity you get when you hear music from a room you're not supposed to enter. Except in my case, the room wasn't a room. It was a closet. My mom's closet, to be exact. Now, before you jump to conclusions, this wasn't some wild, secret scene. This wasn't anything explicit. There was nothing inappropriate happening in that house. My mother was a good woman, and she raised me the best way she knew how. But she also had a habit. She saved things. Not everything, just the things that mattered. A dress she wore to a wedding. A scarf from a trip she took with my father before life got complicated. A coat that still smelled faintly like the perfume she only wore on special occasions. To me, it wasn't just clothing. It was history you could touch. And one afternoon, when I was about 12, old enough to understand embarrassment, young enough to still believe curiosity could be forgiven, I came home early from school. The house was unusually quiet. No television. No clinking dishes. No phone conversations drifting down the hallway. Just silence. I remember calling out, "Mom?" No answer. I checked the kitchen. Empty. Then the living room. Still empty. And the weird thing was I wasn't scared. Not yet. Because my mother wasn't careless. If she wasn't home, she usually left a note. Something short and practical. "Back soon. At the store. Don't forget your homework." But that day, nothing. That's when I noticed her bedroom door wasn't fully closed. It was open, just a crack. And I don't know what made me do it. I couldn't tell you if it was boredom, or that quiet itch of curiosity, or something deeper that I didn't have words for back then. I pushed the door open. Her room smelled like clean laundry and the faint floral detergent she always bought. Sunlight fell in a long stripe across the carpet. Everything was tidy. Made bed. Shoes lined up like soldiers. Her closet door slightly ajar. I should have walked out right then. I didn't. I stepped closer to the closet and pulled the door wider, slowly, like opening it too fast might set off an alarm. Inside, her clothes hung in neat rows. Colors grouped. Hangers all matching. It looked like control. And in the back behind the everyday things was a section that felt different. Clothes that weren't for grocery shopping. Clothes that weren't for casual weekends. Older pieces. Carefully kept. My hands went cold. I remember staring at one outfit in particular. Not flashy. Not revealing. Just unmistakably hers. Something she would have worn when she wanted to feel confident. When she wanted the world to take her seriously but also see her softness. I reached out and touched the fabric with my fingertips. And that's when I heard it. A sound behind me. Not a voice. A footstep. I froze so hard my shoulders ached. Then I heard the most terrifying thing a 12-year-old can hear when they're somewhere they shouldn't be. My mother's key turning in the front door. My mind went blank. My chest tightened. My hands pulled back like the clothes were hot. I took one step away from the closet. Then another. I was about to run, actually run, when I heard her voice from the hallway. Not angry. Not even suspicious. Just surprised. "Honey," she called. "Are you home already?" I couldn't answer. I couldn't breathe properly. I turned toward the bedroom door, and in the next second she appeared in the doorway. My mother stood there with grocery bags in her arms, her hair slightly windblown, her coat half unbuttoned. Her eyes flicked to me. Then, without missing a beat, her gaze moved past me. Straight to the closet. To the open closet. To the section I'd been touching. And I watched her face change in a way I still remember, even all these years later. Not disgust. Not fury. Not shock. Something else. A quiet calculation. Like she was trying to decide which version of this moment would shape the rest of my life. She set the grocery bags down slowly, as if any sudden movement might scare me into disappearing. Then she looked back at me and said something I never expected her to say. She said, very calmly, "Did you open that closet because you were curious?" She paused, eyes steady on mine. "Or because you've been carrying something by yourself?" My throat tightened so hard I could barely swallow. And before I could answer, before I could lie, she took a step toward me, lowered her voice, and added, "It's okay, but you have to tell me the truth." I stood there, trapped between the urge to run and the strange feeling that, for the first time, someone might actually let me breathe. And then my mother reached past me, pulled one outfit from the hanger, and held it up not as a joke, not as a punishment, like she was offering me a choice. And she said the words that changed everything. "Try it on and then we'll talk." I stared at the outfit in her hands, because suddenly this wasn't my secret anymore. And I had no idea whether that was the beginning of freedom or the end of the life I understood. I never imagined my mother would be the one to say it. Not a warning, not a lecture, not a threat, just a calm sentence that made my entire body go still. "Take your time. No rushing." I stood in the hallway, heart pounding, wearing something I had only ever touched in secret. The house looked exactly the same framed family photos, same worn runner rug, same quiet afternoon light, yet I felt like I'd stepped into a different life. My mom didn't stare. She didn't scan me like she was looking for something to be disappointed by. She pulled out a chair at the kitchen table and sat down, deliberately choosing the most ordinary posture in the world, as if to tell me this wasn't a disaster. "Okay," she said softly. "Thank you for trusting me." That was the moment my throat tightened, because I realized she wasn't reacting the way fear had trained me to expect. I tried to speak, but my voice didn't cooperate. So I just stood there, hands awkward at my sides, feeling exposed in a way that had nothing to do with fabric and everything to do with being seen. My mom folded her hands on the table. "Honey," she said, "I want to make something clear before either of us says the wrong thing." I swallowed hard. "You are not in trouble," she continued. "And you are not wrong." I let out a shaky breath that sounded too loud in the quiet kitchen. My first instinct was to joke, to turn it into something silly, so I could escape the seriousness. I forced a laugh that came out brittle. "This is stupid," I muttered. My mom tilted her head, eyes steady. "Is it stupid?" she asked gently. "Or is it scary?" I didn't answer. She nodded like she understood anyway. "Come sit," she said, patting the chair across from her. "You don't have to stand like you're waiting for a verdict." The word verdict hit me like a bruise. I moved slowly and sat down, still not knowing where to put my hands, not knowing where to look. My mom didn't rush to fill the silence. She waited until my breathing stopped sounding like panic. Then she asked, "How long have you been carrying this by yourself?" My mouth went dry. I stared at the table grain like it could give me a script. "A long time," I whispered. My mom nodded once. "Okay," she said. "That means you've been strong. And tired." Strong and tired. No one had ever described it that way. Most of my life I'd called it weakness. Or weirdness. Or something to bury. My mom leaned back slightly. "I'm going to ask you something," she said, "and you can answer with as little as you want." I looked up, cautious. "Did you do this because you wanted attention?" she asked. "Or because something in you feels more comfortable this way sometimes?" The question was so carefully worded it made my chest ache. "Comfort," I admitted. The word came out like a confession. My mom's face softened, and she exhaled slowly as if she'd been holding her breath too. "Thank you," she said. "That helps me understand." I blinked, confused. "You're not mad?" My mom's eyebrows lifted with a quiet sadness. "Mad," she repeated. "No. I'm heartbroken you thought you had to hide from me." That line landed harder than anger ever could have. I stared down again, jaw tight. "I didn't want you to look at me differently." My mom reached across the table not to grab me, just to place her hand near mine like an offered bridge. I am looking at you differently, she said softly. My stomach dropped. Then she added, I'm looking at you more clearly. The room went very still. I felt heat behind my eyes and I hated it because crying felt like losing control. I tried to swallow it back, but my voice cracked anyway. I don't even know what this means, I said. My mom nodded. You don't have to know today, she replied. Today we're only doing one thing. We're removing shame from the room.
Shame.
She said it like it was dust on a shelf, something you could wipe away if you were willing to see it. I took a shaky breath. What if Dad? My mom's expression changed, instantly protective, firm. Stop, she said, not harshly, but with a finality that made me freeze. We are not borrowing trouble from the future. We're dealing with right now. You and me. I didn't realize how much I needed that until she said it. She continued, and right now my child is sitting in front of me terrified because they're afraid love is conditional. My throat tightened again, and I looked away because hearing her call me her child, so simple, so unconditional, made my defenses wobble. My mom let the silence sit for a moment. Then she said, I'm going to set some rules. Not rules to control you. Rules to protect you. I looked up, wary. Rule 1, she said, holding up one finger. Nobody gets to humiliate you in this house. Not anyone. Not even you. My breath hitched. Rule 2, she continued. No secrets that turn into lies. You don't have to tell me everything, but you also don't get to tell me you're fine when you're not. I swallowed and nodded slightly.
Rule 3, she said.
This stays age-appropriate and respectful. This is about comfort and identity, not about anything adult. I nodded again, relief and fear tangled together. Her clarity made the space safer. Rule 4, she added. If you ever feel overwhelmed, you say, pause, and we stop. No arguments. I stared at her. You've thought about this. My mom gave me the faintest smile. I'm your mother, she said. Thinking is what I do. For the first time since she walked in, I felt a small crack of warmth in my chest. Then she stood up and walked to the counter where the grocery bag still sat. She started putting things away, milk in the fridge, bread on the counter, simple motions, ordinary life continuing. It was a message without words. The world is not ending. While she put the groceries away, she spoke over her shoulder, voice casual but careful. I'm going to ask something else, she said. Do you have a name for how you feel? Not for me, just for you. My heartbeat spiked. I didn't answer. She didn't push. She just rinsed an apple under the faucet, dried it with a towel, and set it on a plate like this was any other afternoon. Then she turned back and looked at me. I saw your face when you came out of that bathroom, she said quietly. That wasn't a joke face. That wasn't rebellion. That was relief. I stared down at my hands, ashamed of how true it felt. My mom sat back down across from me. I want to do one more thing, she said. My stomach tightened. What? She reached into the small drawer beside the fridge and pulled out a pen and a blank index card. She placed the card on the table between us. You don't have to say anything out loud, she said. If there's a name you've ever thought of even once, you can write it. Or you can write, I don't know. Or you can leave it blank. My hands started shaking again. My mom slid the pen a little closer and then deliberately leaned back, giving me space. I'm not going to look until you hand it to me, she said. This is yours. I stared at the pen like it weighed 1,000 pounds. This was the doorway I'd always avoided. Not the clothing. Not the closet. The name. Because a name made it real. I picked up the pen. My fingers felt clumsy. I hovered over the card for a long time, the tip trembling above the paper. My mom didn't speak. The only sound in the kitchen was the refrigerator hum and my own heartbeat. Finally, I wrote something. Not a full sentence. Not an explanation. Just a name. I set the pen down and stared at the card like it might burst into flames. My mom held out her hand, palm up, like she was asking for something fragile. I slid the card across the table. She picked it up. I watched her eyes move across the letters. And then I saw her expression change, subtle, but unmistakable. Not because she was angry. Because she recognized the name. Or at least she recognized why I chose it. She looked up at me, eyes shining with something like grief and love mixed together. "That's beautiful," she said softly. I barely managed to whisper, "You're not disappointed?" My mom shook her head slowly. "I'm proud of you," she said. "And I'm sorry you didn't think you could tell me." I felt my chest crack open in a way I didn't know how to handle. Then my mom glanced toward the hallway toward the front door. And her whole posture shifted. She stood up so quickly the chair legs scraped the floor. I froze. "What is it?" My mom's face had turned alert, almost startled. She walked to the window above the sink and looked out. Then she went very still. I followed her gaze, heart starting to race again. A car had pulled into our driveway. A car I recognized. And the worst part was the timing. My mom turned toward me, voice suddenly urgent but controlled. "Go," she said, barely moving her lips. "Back to the bathroom.
Now."
And take a breath. I'll handle this." My stomach dropped. "Who is that?" I whispered, already knowing. My mom didn't answer directly. She just repeated, firmer this time.
"Now."
I stood up fast, chair scraping loudly. Panic shot through me. My feet moved before my mind caught up, and I hurried down the hallway. Behind me, I heard the front doorbell ring.
Once.
Then again. And my mom, in the calmest voice she could manage, called out, "Coming." I reached the bathroom door with my heart hammering, hand on the knob. And that's when I heard a second voice in the hallway, closer than it should have been. A familiar voice. A voice that absolutely was not supposed to be here today. And it said, "Hey, Mom. I forgot my—" The voice stopped. Silence snapped tight across the house. And I realized with cold certainty that whoever had walked in had already seen me. I spun the bathroom lock, so fast my fingers slipped. My heart was hammering like it wanted out of my ribs. I leaned against the door, breathing through my nose the way Mom always taught me when I was a little slow in, slower out, except now it didn't work. Nothing worked. Because outside that door, the house had gone quiet in a way that felt dangerous. I could hear my mother in the hallway, her voice suddenly brighter than normal, too bright, like she was trying to paint over a crack. "Oh, hey, sweetheart," she said. A pause. Then that familiar voice again, closer now, confused. "Mom, who's here?" My stomach dropped so hard I thought I might be sick. It wasn't my dad. It was my older sister, Brooke. Brooke was the kind of person who walked into a room and immediately owned it without trying. She was 17, already taller than Mom, already practicing the sort of confidence I didn't understand. She could read people like she'd been trained for it. And she had just seen me. Not clearly, maybe. Not for long. But enough. From inside the bathroom, I stared at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the kid looking back. My face was pale. My eyes were wide. My hair was messy from pulling clothes on and off too quickly. The outfit, Mom's outfit, sat on me like a truth that had slipped out of its hiding place. I heard Brooke's footsteps move down the hallway. Then stop. She didn't go to her room. She didn't go to the kitchen. She stopped right outside the bathroom door. My breath caught. "Is that you in there?"
Brooke asked.
Her voice wasn't teasing. It wasn't laughing. It was cautious, like she didn't know what she'd just stepped into. I pressed my forehead against the cool wood of the door and wished I could meld into it. Mom spoke fast, controlled. "Brooke, honey, give me a second." Brooke didn't move. I could tell by the silence. She was standing there, probably with her arms crossed, her weight on one hip the way she did when she knew she was being lied to. "Mom," Brooke said slower. "What's going on?" Mom's voice softened. "Nothing bad," she said. "Just a family moment. That's all." Brooke exhaled. "A family moment behind a locked bathroom door?" she said. Not sarcastic. Just blunt. I heard Mom step closer to her, lowering her voice. But the hallway carried sound easily, and I caught pieces. "Please," Mom said quietly. "Not like that. I'm handling it." Brooke's response was immediate. "Handling what?" My hands were shaking so badly, I had to grip the sink to steady myself. Then Brooke said something I'll never forget, because it wasn't what I expected from her at all. Is he scared? She asked. There was a beat of silence. Mom's voice came softer, like she didn't want me to hear, and also wanted me to hear. Yes, Mom admitted. He's terrified. Another pause. Then Brooke said, okay. Just one word. But it changed the air outside the door. It wasn't agreement. It wasn't judgment. It was a decision. Like she'd chosen a side. I heard her take a step back. Then another. Brooke spoke louder, so I could hear clearly through the wood. Hey, she said, voice calmer now. I'm going to go to my room. I'm not coming back out until Mom says it's okay. All right. I swallowed hard. My mouth wouldn't form words. Brooke added, and I'm not mad. I'm just surprised. But I'm not mad. I squeezed my eyes shut. Mom's voice tightened with relief. Thank you, she said. Brooke's footsteps moved away down the hall. I heard her bedroom door close. And then the house was quiet again, except for me breathing like I'd just run a mile. There was a gentle knock on the bathroom door. Sweetheart, Mom asked, can I come in? I stared at the lock. My voice came out cracked. Yeah. The door opened slowly. Mom stepped in, closed it behind her, and leaned against it for a second, like even she needed to catch her breath. Her face looked composed, but her eyes gave her away she was shaken too, just better at hiding it. She saw you, I whispered, ashamed. Mom nodded. Yes, she said. But she also heard me, and she chose kindness. I stared at the sink. I ruined everything, I said. Mom's face tightened. No, she said firmly. You didn't. Listen to me. She took my hands in her steady, warm. You did not ruin anything, she repeated. This is not a disaster. This is a hard moment. Those are different. My throat tightened again. She's going to tell Dad. Mom's eyes sharpened. No, she said, and the certainty in her voice startled me. Brooke won't. How do you know? I asked. Mom exhaled slowly. Because I know my daughter, she said. And because I'm going to talk to her. My voice dropped. What if she thinks I'm weird? Mom tilted her head, studying me. Do you think you're weird? She asked. I didn't answer fast enough. Mom nodded. That's what we're fixing, she said. She glanced at the mirror, then back at me. Now, she continued, voice practical again, we're going to do something very simple. You're going to change back into your clothes. Not because you did something wrong. Because you need your body to calm down. I blinked. So, we stop. Mom shook her head. We pause, she corrected. We do not bury it again. I swallowed. Brooke. I will handle Brooke, Mom said. But you need to promise me one thing. What? I asked. Mom's gaze held mine. You don't turn this into a shame spiral, she said. You don't start thinking you're broken because someone saw you. You're not broken. My eyes burned again, and I nodded quickly. Mom stepped back, giving me room. Change, she said softly. Then come to the kitchen. I'll be right there. I changed fast, hands still trembling. When I was done, I looked at the outfit folded neatly on the counter and felt a sting like I was saying goodbye to a version of myself I'd only just met. Mom noticed my stare. You didn't lose anything, she said quietly. It's still here. I followed her out into the kitchen. The chair I'd been sitting in earlier was still pulled out, like the conversation was waiting for us to come back. Mom sat. I sat. We both stared at the table for a moment, the ordinary surface holding an extraordinary day. Mom broke the silence first. I'm going to speak to Brooke, she said. But before I do, I need to know one thing. Do you want her to know the name you wrote? My chest tightened. No, I said quickly. Not yet. Mom nodded. Okay, she said. Then I won't. She paused, then added. But I'm going to tell her something else. What? I asked, alarm rising. Mom's voice was steady. I'm going to tell her that you were brave today, she said, and that she is not allowed to turn your bravery into a joke. I blinked hard. Mom. She reached across and tapped the table once, like punctuation. This is our house, she said. And in our house, nobody gets to crush someone for being honest. I swallowed. Mom stood up. Stay here, she said. Drink some water.
Breathe.
I'll be back. She walked down the hallway toward Brooke's room. The moment she disappeared, I felt the panic creep back in. Because now it wasn't just a secret between me and my mom. Now there was a witness. I sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at the glass of water Mom had set in front of me. My hands were still shaking, but less now, like my body was slowly learning that the ceiling wasn't going to collapse. Then I heard muffled voices through the hallway. Mom and Brooke. I couldn't make out every word, but I caught enough to feel my stomach twist. I'm not stupid, Brooke said, voice low. I saw him. I know, Mom replied. Is he? Brooke started. He's scared, Mom said again, firm. A pause. Then Brooke's voice, softer than I'd ever heard it. Did he ask you for help? Mom's answer was quiet.
No.
I found him, and I chose not to hurt him. Silence. Then Brooke said, Okay. So what do we do now? My breath caught. What do we do now? I didn't expect her to say that. I expected disgust, or jokes, or anger. I expected to be alone. I heard Mom's voice, measured and calm. We protect him, she said. We don't gossip. We don't tease. We don't make it about us. Brooke exhaled.
Fine, she said.
But Mom, you have to tell me something. Mom's voice tightened.
What?
Brooke's next words made the hair on my arms rise. You're acting like this isn't new, Brooke said. Like you've suspected it before. A pause so long it felt like the whole house stopped breathing. Then Mom said, very quietly, I have. My stomach dropped. Brooke's voice sharpened. Since when? Mom didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice sounded older, like she was talking about a regret. Since you were little, Mom admitted. There were signs. Small ones. I didn't push. I thought maybe it would pass, or maybe you'd tell me when you were ready. Brooke went quiet. Then she said, And you never said anything? Mom's answer was a whisper. Because I was afraid I'd say the wrong thing. My throat tightened. In the kitchen, I stared at the water glass and felt something new mix with my fear, a strange tenderness for my mother, who had apparently been walking around with this quiet suspicion for years, trying not to break me with her own uncertainty. Then I heard footsteps, 2 sets coming down the hallway together. My pulse spiked. I sat up straighter, panic rising again. I didn't know what face to wear. I didn't know whether to look at Brooke or look away. I didn't know whether to pretend nothing happened. The hallway light shifted. Brooke appeared first in the kitchen doorway. She didn't come all the way in. She just stood there, hands at her sides, eyes on me. Mom stepped in behind her, one hand lightly on Brooke's shoulder like a reminder. Be careful. Brooke stared at me for a long second. Then she said, in a voice that was trying very hard not to shake, Hey. I swallowed. Hey. Brooke nodded once, as if that confirmed I was still the same person. Then she glanced at Mom, then back at me. I'm not going to tell Dad, she said bluntly. So, stop looking like you're about to pass out. My breath caught. I didn't realize I'd been holding it until it spilled out. Brooke took a step into the kitchen, cautious but real. Then she said the last thing I expected from her. Can I sit? I blinked. Yeah. She sat down across from me, leaving space between us, like she didn't want to crowd me. For a moment, none of us spoke. Then Brooke looked at Mom. You said there were rules, she said. Mom nodded. There are. Brooke's eyes returned to me. Okay, she said. Tell me what you need from me. My throat tightened again, because the question wasn't, what are you? Or, why are you like this? Or, how could you? It was, what do you need? I opened my mouth. And at that exact moment, the front door opened again.
Heavy footsteps this time.
A familiar clearing of a throat. A sound that made all 3 of us freeze in the same instant. My mother's face changed. Brooke's eyes widened. And the voice from the hallway said, cheerful and unsuspecting, Anybody home? It was my father. And he was walking toward the kitchen. My father's voice floated down the hallway like everything was normal. Anybody home? For half a second, none of us moved. Mom stood at the kitchen entrance, one hand still resting lightly on Brooke's shoulder. Brooke was seated across from me, her posture stiff, eyes flicking toward the hallway as if she could stop time by staring hard enough. And me, I felt like my skin had turned to paper. Dad's footsteps got closer. Each step was a countdown. Mom reacted first. Not with panic, she moved with the kind of calm speed that only comes from years of managing crises without letting the children see it. "Brooke," Mom said quietly, barely moving her lips, "go to your room."
Now.
Brooke looked up at her. "Mom." "Now," Mom repeated, and there was steel under the softness. Brooke stood so fast the chair legs scraped against the tile. She glanced at me just once, and in that glance there was a strange promise. "I'm not leaving you to drown." Then she slipped out of the kitchen and disappeared down the hallway. Mom's eyes snapped to me. "Sweetheart," she said in a low voice, "stand up." I froze. Mom didn't raise her voice. She just spoke like the next 10 seconds were an emergency drill. "Stand up," she repeated. "Walk to the laundry closet. And put on this hoodie." She grabbed the nearest oversized hoodie from the back of a chair, Dad's old gray one, soft and shapeless, and held it out to me. My hands fumbled as I stood. I could feel the blood rushing in my ears.
Mom,
"Look at me," she said.
I did.
Her face was calm, but her eyes were urgent in a way I'd never seen before. "This is not shame," she said. "This is privacy. There is a difference." I swallowed, barely able to breathe. She pushed the hoodie into my hands.
Put it on.
Over everything. I pulled it over my head. The fabric swallowed my shoulders and covered most of what I'd been wearing. It didn't erase what had happened, but it gave me armor. Dad's voice came closer, cheerful, unsuspecting. "I'm in the kitchen, huh? Smells like." Mom lifted her chin and raised her voice in an easy, normal tone. "Hi, hon." "Yeah, I grabbed groceries." "You're early." Dad entered the kitchen doorway. He stopped, smiling, looking from Mom to me. "Hey," he said warmly.
"Kiddo."
"You home from school already?" I forced a nod. My throat was so tight, I wasn't sure sound would come out if I tried. Dad's eyes swept over me, quick, casual. The oversized hoodie helped. It made me look like I'd just thrown something on. Like I was cold. Like I was normal. But dads notice things. Even when they don't know what they're noticing. Dad's smile faded a fraction, replaced by the smallest squint. "What's going on?" he asked, still gentle but now alert. Mom didn't miss a beat. "Nothing's going on," she said, breezy. Brooke popped in, asked for something she forgot, then ran back out. "You know her." Dad's gaze flicked toward the hallway. "I heard her," he said. "She didn't say hi." "She was in a hurry," Mom replied. Dad took a step farther into the kitchen. His eyes returned to me. "And you?" he asked. "You're quiet." I tried to speak. My mouth opened. Nothing came. Mom slid in smoothly. "He's had a rough day," she said, setting her hand lightly on my shoulder, a mother's touch that looked ordinary but felt like a lifeline. "And I'm making him tea." Dad nodded slowly, but his eyes didn't leave my face. He was reading me. I could feel the heat in my cheeks. I stared at the counter, focusing on the cereal box like it was the most important object in the world. Dad took another step toward the table, then stopped. His voice changed slightly, still kind, but quieter. "Did something happen at school?" he asked. My stomach turned. If I said yes, I'd be lying. If I said no, he'd push harder. Mom reached for the kettle, as if this was all routine. She turned on the stove.
Click. Flame.
"Not school," Mom said lightly. "Just feelings. You know how it is at that age." Dad didn't buy it completely. I could tell by the silence. He looked at me again, then asked the question that nearly made me drop right there in the kitchen. "Why are you wearing my hoodie?" he said. My pulse spiked. Mom answered instantly. "Because I told him to," she said, calm as a lake. "The house is chilly today." Dad looked around as if checking the air temperature. Then he laughed once softly, but the laugh didn't quite reach his eyes.
"It's not that chilly," he said.
Mom smiled back at him. "Maybe I'm chilly," she replied, voice playful now, turning the moment into a harmless domestic exchange. "Does it matter?" Dad's eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger, in suspicion. He glanced toward the hallway again. "Where's Brooke?" he asked. Mom lifted her shoulders in a shrug. "In her room," she said. "Probably on the phone." Dad stared for a beat. Then he pulled out a chair and sat down at the table, closer to me than I wanted. My hands trembled under the table. I pressed them against my thighs, trying to anchor myself. Dad leaned forward slightly, voice lower. "All right," he said. "What's the real story?" Mom turned off the stove and faced him fully, kettle heating behind her like background noise in a storm. "Frank," she said gently, "there is no real story you need to solve right now." Dad blinked. "What does that mean?" Mom's voice stayed calm. "It means our child is having a private day," she said. "And you don't need to interrogate him in the kitchen." Dad's jaw tightened. "I'm not interrogating," he said. "I'm asking. And I'm answering," Mom replied, still soft, but now unmovable. Dad looked at me again, searching my face for clues. I wanted to disappear. Then he said, quieter, "Did you do something wrong?" My stomach dropped. Mom's response was immediate, firm. "No," she said. "He did not." Dad's eyes flicked back to her. "Then why are you acting like this is a crisis?" Mom paused just long enough to make the room feel heavier. Because she couldn't lie forever. Not with Dad 2 feet away. Not with Brooke in her room, holding her own breath. Not with me shaking like a trapped animal. Mom took a slow breath and chose her words carefully, like placing glass on a table. "This is not a crisis," she said. "This is a conversation. One I'm having with him." Dad stared.
"About what?"
Mom's eyes didn't leave Dad's. "About growing up," she said. "About identity. About feelings he hasn't had the words for." The word identity hit the air like a dropped plate. Dad went still. His expression changed not to rage, not yet. To confusion first. Then something like fear. He looked back at me, and for the first time his gaze wasn't just a father checking on his kid. It was a man trying to map the world in his head, and realizing the map might be outdated. "What are you saying?" Dad asked slowly. Mom's voice stayed gentle, but it didn't retreat. "I'm saying he was curious about my closet," she said. "And I found him. And I chose to respond with love instead of shame." Dad's eyes widened slightly. He looked at Mom like she'd spoken another language. Then he looked at me again, and I felt the room shrink. My throat closed. Dad's voice came out tight. "You were wearing her clothes?" The word "her" felt like a spotlight. I couldn't speak. Mom stepped closer to the table, placing herself slightly between Dad and me without making it obvious. "Frank," she said, "lower your voice." Dad exhaled sharply through his nose. He wasn't yelling, but the tension in him was rising. "I'm not yelling," he said. Mom held his gaze. "Not yet," she replied. That stopped him for a second. Dad rubbed a hand over his mouth, then looked at me again. "Why?" he asked, softer now, but the question carried weight. "Why would you do that?" I swallowed. My mouth opened.
"Still nothing."
Mom spoke for me, careful. "Because it made him feel calm," she said. "Because it made him feel like he could breathe." Dad stared at her. "That doesn't make sense." Mom nodded. "It doesn't make sense to you yet," she said. "But that doesn't make it wrong." Dad's eyes flicked toward the hallway again, as if he expected Brooke to come rushing in and confirm it was a prank. Instead, the house stayed silent. He looked back at Mom, and his voice dropped. "Are you telling me our son is what?" he asked. Mom's expression tightened. "I'm telling you our child is a human being," she said. "And we don't label him today. We don't corner him. We don't shame him." Dad's face hardened slightly at the word shame, like he didn't want to be accused of it. "I'm not shaming anybody," he said. Mom nodded once, as if accepting the statement, but not trusting it yet. "Good," she replied. "Then help me." Dad stared. "Help you do what?" Mom gestured gently toward the kettle, toward the table, toward the ordinary kitchen, trying to pull him back into normal life. "Help me make this house safe," she said. "So he doesn't learn to hate himself." That sentence landed hard. Dad blinked, genuinely shaken now. His eyes returned to me, and I saw something unexpected flash across his face. Not disgust. Not anger. A kind of grief, like he was realizing he'd missed something important. Dad's voice got quieter. How long? He asked. Mom didn't answer immediately. She looked at me first, asking without words whether she should speak. I couldn't give permission. I couldn't think. So Mom chose the smallest truth that still mattered. A while, she said. Long enough that he was scared to tell you. Dad flinched at that. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the table like the wood grain held the solution. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Dad did something that surprised me. He stood up. My stomach lurched. He didn't move toward me. He moved toward the kitchen counter, away from the table, giving me space without announcing it. He took a long breath, then another. When he turned back, his voice was steadier. Okay, he said, slowly, like he was forcing himself to learn a new way to speak. Okay. I don't understand it. Mom didn't interrupt. Dad continued. But I don't want to hurt you. My chest tightened painfully. He looked at me. His eyes were glossy, and that scared me more than anger would have. I need time, he said. To think. To not say something stupid. Mom nodded, relief flickering across her face. That's fair, she said softly. Dad swallowed. But I want one thing, he said, voice firm again. My body tensed. Dad looked at Mom first, then at me. No secrets that split this family, he said. If we're going to do this, we do it together. Mom held his gaze. Together doesn't mean forcing him to talk before he's ready, she replied. Dad nodded once, tight. I know, he said. But I want to be part of the solution, not the enemy. Mom's shoulders eased slightly, like the room had gotten a fraction less dangerous. Then Dad looked at me again and said, quietly, Can you tell me one thing? Just one. My throat closed. Dad's voice softened. Are you okay? He asked.
Right now.
Are you okay in your own skin? I stared at him, panic and honesty colliding, because the real answer was complicated, and I didn't have words big enough. Behind us, the kettle started to whistle sharp, rising, demanding attention like the house itself couldn't stand the silence anymore. Mom turned to shut it off. And in that tiny moment, when Mom's back was turned, Dad's eyes stayed on me. And he said something so quiet I almost missed it. I saw you earlier, he whispered. My blood went cold. I didn't see everything, he added quickly. But I saw enough. In the hallway. Before you locked the door. My heart slammed. He had been here sooner than we thought. Or maybe he'd come in another way. Or maybe worst of all, he'd seen more than he was admitting. Dad swallowed hard, voice barely steady. I didn't know what I was looking at, he said. But I knew you were terrified. Mom turned back from the stove, hearing the change in his tone. Frank, she said sharply. Dad didn't look away from me. And now, he continued, I need you to trust me enough to tell me what you need. My mouth opened. This time, sound finally came out. But it wasn't the sentence I expected. It was a name I hadn't meant to say in front of him. And the instant it slipped out, Mom's eyes widened. Dad went completely still. Because once a name is spoken aloud in a kitchen with your parents listening, nothing can go back into the closet again.